Hi, I'm Chike Coleman, that's Sanford Hess, and this is Real Reviews Rewind, the show where we rewind the clock a little bit and look at some older films.
But this week, we're not talking about older films.
We're talking about newer films.
Okay.
And this week, we're going to be looking at the new Eddie Murphy film, Dolemite Is My Name, and we're also going to be looking at Celine Sciamma's Portrait of a Lady on Fire. But first, let's talk about Dolemite Is My Name. Directed by Craig Brewer, starring Eddie Murphy, Michael Keegan-Key, and let's see.
Wesley Snipes.
Wesley Snipes.
Snoop Dogg shows up.
Wesley Snipes, Titus Welliver, Chris Rock. Linnell has a surprising role in this film. It's a film about a man whose name I'm blanking on.
Rudy Ray Moore.
Rudy Ray Moore, who is a stand-up comedian who has been working for years to be a singer for a club hit. He wants to make his own club hit. He's always tried to be successful at something because we learn later on in the film he comes from the poor part of Arkansas and has always wanted to make something of himself, but was told he ain't, pretty much he was told that. So what he decides to do is use the folklore and the stories of the, what would you call them? The hobos?
Well, it's this one guy, this one hobo we'll go with, who tells these sort of, lyrical stories about Dolemite.
Yeah. And all of his ass-kicking chicanery. And Rudy decides to use that fun folklore storytelling style in his comedic act, and to his surprise, it wins audiences over. Pretty much after that, he's slowly getting to the point where he's making records, and eventually he decides, after seeing a movie, after a point of success, he says, hey, I want to be in the films. I want to be on that screen because nobody like us is on that screen right now. And sets out to make his own movie. And of course, trouble, chaos, and humor ensues.
Now, I think it's worth noting that this is all a true story.
Yes, it's very much a true story. You actually see clips from the actual movie Dolemite at the end of the film's credits. And I'll say this. This is going to be a career-defining performance for Eddie Murphy. This is what we're going to look back and say, Eddie Murphy was funny, but he could also do drama really well. Because every moment where things don't go right for Rudy Ray Moore, you feel it. You don't feel it with the other characters around Rudy. You feel it for Rudy because of how hurt and how pained he is. You get one really quiet scene where he's sitting in his stage area writing more Rudy Dolemite jokes, and you see him looking at a picture of what it was like for him in Arkansas, and you see him use his character to stand up basically to his past and be recommitted to finishing his movie. And it's probably the most powerful scene in the entire film. I really thought Murphy shone here very brightly, and all the other colorful characters that he crosses paths with throughout the film. What did you think of Dolemite Is My Name, Sanford?
Well, let me say this first about Eddie's performance. It's one of those roles where he's in pretty much every shot of the movie. I mean, there's a few probably that he's not in, but most of the movie is him reacting to events around him, and I agree with you. I mean, I think he shows range. However, I would say I think he's, I'm not sure this is going to be one of the defining performances because, if anything, Eddie Murphy kind of underplays things.
I think that's the joy of it, though.
Yeah. I mean, the character, and I think this is true to the story, as Rudy Ray Moore, he's a pretty low-key guy who puts on an act that is in the, when he's on stage or when he's in the movie, he's putting on this act. But in the scenes where he's being just Rudy Ray Moore, he's pretty low-key.
But I think that's what draws you in is how low-key he is.
Right.
And how emotionally invested you can see that he is. especially during his points of projection.
But, and I agree with you, I just think that it's, you know, it's, as a performance, I guess probably the most impressive thing you can say is that he doesn't like overdo it. He is restrained. And on that level, yeah, I agree with you, it's a great performance, but I'm going to still say it's not even in my top 5 Eddie Murphy movie performances.
What is, if you're going to put it that way?
Well, you know, actually it's ironic because just like 2 or 3 weeks ago we watched Coming to America.
Yeah?
With our son. He had never seen it.
Oh, that's going to be great.
Yeah, and you know, it's a fun movie. Although actually it's not as funny in retrospect as you may remember it at the time.
No, it's a little bit insulting, actually.
Yeah, but his performance in 3 or 4 different roles is, you know, just really what does that. I wasn't prepared for this. I would even say some of his silly roles, like the Nutty Professor, he's great in that, and again in like 6 different characters. Actually, I should show my son that one. And
he'll get the fart jokes for sure.
Yeah, right. So I'll have to come back with my long list of Eddie Murphy movies, but there's been a lot of great performances. Okay, that being said, what did I think of Dolemite? I liked this movie a lot from a narrative perspective because I felt like they told the story really well. And I don't usually do a lot of research before we film these shows, and I wasn't reading reviews of the movie, but I watched the movie and I thought, how similar is this to the real events?
And it's extremely similar.
It's extremely accurate. Now, I do think that they did the classic, we're going to squish some events together. And the way that he met Lady Reed.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how true that scenario was, or if there were several events that were squished together, because it seemed kind of improbable.
Yeah, a little bit.
But that being said, I thought that the best thing I can say about this movie is it balanced the speed of the story well. The beginning went at a reasonable pace to sort of introduce you to what's going on. Then his success as in his early career as Dolemite went pretty fast.
Yeah.
Which was good because the movie was trying to get you to the point where the filming of his picture started.
Yeah.
And at that point it slowed back down and really took its time through that sequence.
Yeah, and then sped back up when things were fun and happy.
Yeah, and so I appreciated that because this movie was focusing on a couple of key parts of the story. And I thought that it did a good job balancing that with all the other things. And I thought it also did a good job with the side characters. There were, you know, they weren't very fully fleshed out. Maybe Lady Reed was the most.
Probably the most, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, in general, there was some nice interplay with some other people, but he had his kind of core group of 3 friends.
Right.
And I liked the way that they both grounded him and sort of, they carried him through, obviously, some of the hard times early. You could tell there's some good rapport there.
What made you laugh, though? Because that's what this movie is supposed to elicit. It's supposed to elicit some information to you about who Rudy was,
yeah,
but also made you laugh. So what made you laugh?
His stage act did not make me laugh.
Of course not.
And I think that's, a lot of that's, it's a time and a place. Our tastes are different now. So that part, I thought that the films, the part filming the movie made me laugh because I appreciated it. That part really reminded me of The Disaster Artist.
Oh, yeah.
The Tommy Wiseau movie, which came out a couple years ago, which was very similar movie. Even in the way they filmed the making of the movie part, as well as having the clips at the end with the actual film. And even in Disaster Artist, they put the clips side by side. In this movie, they didn't do them side by side, but they did sort of show them at the end, the ones they had showed you filming in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that. What made me laugh, actually, ironically, was the part about the movie distribution side, because that's the side of the movie business that I know the best, is what happens once the film has been created and you're trying to sell it. I loved the scene where he was promoting his own film at the theater in Cleveland, I think, somewhere in Ohio. Mm-hmm. And the idea that he had four-walled, which is a real term, you rent the 4 walls of the theater, you're renting the space, and he made all that money, and then here this Hollywood distribution company was looking at the grosses and said, oh my God, look at this crazy money this film did in this one theater.
Yeah.
We could pick that up and sell it across the country. that made me laugh because that is exactly how it happens. I mean, that was so true to life that, you know, I was amused, but more in a, oh, those guys, oh, God, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that part got me. What made you laugh?
What made me laugh is the dumbest thing humanly possible, because I thought it couldn't possibly be real. The making of, and cover your ears, children, the sex scene of the movie was hysterical. The fact that the set broke down and you had the dangling lights and it was made to be the funniest, cheapest possible way the intimacy could be shot, but it was hysterical. That made me laugh really hard.
Yeah, okay, that was a good scene. I did read afterwards, that was one of the things I read, that scene really happened, but it was in a different movie from Dolemite.
Interesting.
Yes. But, you know, that being said, it was a good choice to include that in. Narrative-wise, absolutely.
And I love how the film ended, with Rudy just saying, nah, you know what, I don't need to go in and see this movie. I know it's a success. People seem to love it. I'm going to spend time with the people who really adore who this character is.
Right.
And entertain them while they wait.
Right. And, you know, that part, there was a feel-good ending in the sense of, here's somebody who's in it for the fans. And, you know, feel-good ending in the sense that here's a movie that's selling out, which, as we talked in last week's show, is less and less the case.
Yeah.
So,
and there were 7 more made after it.
Yeah.
Which 7 more from the start of when that first one was made, which is amazing. I mean, talk about a franchise. Jeez.
Talk about cheap movies to film. Yeah. Although actually that part was also fun. I mean, like the way they were shooting the car chase.
Yeah.
You know, and some of the other aspects of actually the sort of guerrilla filmmaking that they were doing. And,
yeah.
You know, the idea that they ran out of film, like literally ran out of the negatives, the film that you film on, and couldn't shoot anymore because they had to go buy more film.
Yeah, and I thought that was a really realistic, true to life thing that happened back then, because it was costly to do that.
Very costly.
And they proved that within the film, and I thought that was an engaging little inside tidbit into filmmaking.
And last thing I'll say about this movie, music.
Okay.
Music was great.
Oh, music was great. I mean, you got Craig Robinson providing some of the songs for Dolemite to work for Dolemite Is My Name, even if he's not the original singer. That guy from The Office is a well-known crooner with those vocal chops that he has. So, yeah, that was a really enjoyable time. And the music and the moves of this movie just keep on giving, so you should definitely see Dolemite Is My Name on Netflix, because that's where it's currently housed.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, I mean, I'll add on, I would say I have my recommendation. It's not a strong recommendation that everybody should see it, but it's a recommendation that if you're into blaxploitation or you're into films of the 70s, you're going to enjoy this. This is definitely an Eddie Murphy passion project. And that comes through. And I agree with you that, you know, this is an important performance. He'll probably get an Oscar nomination for this.
He won't win, but he'll get the nomination.
That's right.
Sure.
That's right. He'll have to wait for Coming to America 2 to win that Oscar.
I hope so. If he's going to get it for Coming to America 2, another passion project you love.
Yes.
All right. With that said, speaking of passions and projects.
Oh, nice.
This next film is called Portrait of a Lady on Fire. And it's directed by Celine Sciammas. It's a French film. The plot is you have a painter who is painting inside of a classroom, and they notice a painting in the back of her classroom of a woman in a darkly lit place on fire. And one of her students asks her, "What is this about?" And she says, "It's a long story." And then you flash back to the 17th century. She's traveling on a boat to a house where we soon find out that she's been asked there by a woman who needs her daughter painted before her wedding to someone who the daughter does not love. And the only way that this person will be willing to be painted is not by posing as would normally be done in that time period, but by stealing glances of her and using the details to create the painting from scratch. And you would think that this whole movie was going to devolve into a giant cat and mouse game of her, struggling to paint the other person, but it's not that at all. The real crux of the movie starts after her first attempt at making the portrait. And you see the deep layers of sadness and confusion about why she's being pushed forward to do this duty because of a relative's death, and wanting to be her own.
The duty being the woman who's getting married is marrying a man because her sister was set to marry him, yet her sister died in mysterious circumstances that we are very much led to believe the sister committed suicide instead of marrying this man.
Right.
So now her younger sister is stepping. I just wanted to that woman.
That is the duty.
The layers of the woman whose portrait is being painted. The layers of feeling there.
Right. And so the artist and her subject become friends, and you would think, oh, it's going to be about these two people, but there's a third person involved. The chambermaid, and I forget what her name is.
I do too.
I think
Sophie?
I believe it's Sophie.
Yeah.
And these individuals have kind of a free running period because the mother has to go away on a trip.
Well, like you said, let's say this. I mean, there's the crux point of the movie is this first portrait, which was done without the knowing of the subject.
Correct.
And she shows it to the subject, and the subject says basically, you didn't capture me, and worse, you didn't do the best job you could do. And then there's this turning shift in the movie, like you said, that now they decide to do a second portrait, and she is going to sit for this one.
Right.
And the mother goes away on a trip, and the two women, the painter and the person whose portrait is being painted, plus Sophie, the three of them are left alone for another week.
So,
5 days.
As much as I want to call this a romance movie, and it is, it's also a feminine, I can't say buddy comedy, but just drama of three people going through different things in life and leaning on each other for support, emotional affection, and understanding. Focus reigns in on the painter and her subject most of the time, but the chambermaid Sophie also has a dilemma of her own, which we will not spoil, but what I will say is a third of the way through the movie, something horrific happens as a result of something that the chambermaid is trying to do, and it is by far the most shocking part of the movie. This film is ultimately about connection, and how, because you're so pushed into what the outside world wants you to be, you can't be the free-spirited person on the inside. And that's the struggle that these women are facing, with completely different dynamics for each individual.
That's an interesting point. I agree with you. And I think, the woman whose portrait is being painted is being forced into this marriage. She was in a convent up till now, and she's very protected from the world. The painter is a very interesting character because she is a woman who is on her own, clearly, making a life for herself at a time where probably that was really uncommon.
But there is still gender discrimination within that.
Absolutely.
And that's what makes that person particularly interesting. And with Sophie, it's kind of a question of responsibility based on the thing that she is trying to avoid.
Yeah.
But also knowing what her duty is to be a part of that home that she is currently serving, and knowing how she has to upkeep herself, and that issue of the thing that she is struggling with getting in the way.
So let's segue from, because that's a really good point about the depth of the characters. Let's talk about the quality of the movie and the quality of the performances. What'd you think?
This is so hard. The quality of the movie is stunning, and everything about this movie that works, and gosh, there's so much of it that does, is in the performances of the two leads. But it's not in what they say. It's in how they look at each other. It's in the looks they give. It's in how their expressions change from happy to sad to upset to challenged to motivated. And it just shifts and shifts and shifts. And watching those transformations of those two actresses throughout the entire film as they discover love, want to abandon it, discover it again, form their own independence.
It's a lot that happens in 5 days.
It is. And you feel every moment of it. I was enraptured by this film because of the performances of these two actresses, especially when the main mother who commissioned the painting leaves.
Right.
I love this film, despite what people may box it in as a lesbian drama. I don't care. It's people living life, living their raw truth in a time when they weren't free to do so. And how amazing that is within that space of time that they got to be themselves and how they do so. Sanford, what did you think of A Portrait of a Lady on Fire?
Wow, with the setup like that, I'm not sure I can say. I like this film, I appreciate the film, but I don't think I liked it as much as you do, which happens a lot. I think I may not throw myself into these films as much. This film, I like the parts of it where, like you said, there's so much that these characters emote to each other through very little, and especially given the fact that it's in French, even some of the way that they say their lines is a little bit lost on us because we're busy reading the subtitles. Mm-hmm. So we are driven more by watching the characters, and there's a lot of scenes where important things happen when all it's through looks or through touch, like the part where they have to say goodbye, and and there's a very just the way that they cling to each other says everything about that moment.
Right.
So there were definitely some great performances and parts I loved. I will say that I thought that the movie itself had some issues with the narrative.
Okay.
I think that they could have told this story in a more engaging way, and I think where they missed sometimes was things happen that just aren't really that realistic, or that didn't feel like they would go down that way.
What was unrealistic? How fast they fell in love?
No, not how fast they fell in love, but like the way they had their first kiss. I felt like all of a sudden, without a lot of explanation, they just show them running away into the beach, into some rocky cave and kissing. But, I would have bought that more if there had been a moment where they were about to kiss, but say they were scared of being caught by Sophie, and that they decide to run away. Because pretty much after the initial phase, they kind of say, oh, we don't care about Sophie. We're just going to do whatever we want anyway. So
they do that. But the way that you just explained it, and I'm not trying to be insulting here,
yeah,
I find that cheesy. I think most of it was exchanged, the passion they felt for each other, and try to go with me on this one, is that they were challenging each other. Every step of the way, they were challenging each other.
Okay.
And the breaking point came when the painter just said, I feel it, but I don't even know if you feel anything too. I'm just going to act on it. And then the scene that you're speaking of happens.
Well, I would buy that more if they had, I felt like there was things that were cut out, maybe. I don't know. Maybe that happened, and then the editing, they thought, well, we don't really need to have them explain how they got to that point. The audience will just fill in the blanks, which I get, and it's not that hard to fill in the blanks. But to me, I really want a natural feeling story. This is a slow-moving movie about two people. There's a lot of opportunity there for them to walk us through the process of how these people got to where they got to. Because they get there pretty fast, and then they kind of go back and explain it a little bit through their stories about when did I first want to kiss you and what. But I would have liked to have seen that forward instead of looking back in a thing.
And I think the thing is, had we seen the subject give a longing look at the painter while she was playing that harpsichord for the first time.
Yeah.
It would have been too obvious that that's where they were going. And I think they were trying to err on the side of subtlety.
Okay.
But I think they overplayed their hand slightly there.
Yeah.
Because once they do acknowledge how they feel about each other, the passion is continuous throughout pretty much the rest of the movie. And by that point, like, the first time they actually, really let themselves go and have that romantic moment, you're like, yay, great for these two people who are not going to be able to have a future together.
Right.
But at the same time, they go back to that, well, at least twice throughout the film. And I'm like, after the first two times, I just believed in the love you had. You didn't need to show me the third time. Like, the first time they did it and the time where she ended up drawing her were really all that I needed to be able to be sold that their love was real, that it means something, and that it has value.
And, you make a good point, because something that they don't really, in a way, dwell on enough is the sadness of the fact that they only have these 5 days together.
They do dwell on that, but they do it in such a coy way that nobody would catch it.
Yeah.
That Odyssey, I think it was, or the Greek mythology.
The Odysseus, the story. That's right. That is actually a really nice sort of subtext, the story of Odysseus. Okay, so time's almost up, but the last thing about this movie, I hated the way it ended. I did, and I'm not going to ruin it for the audience, but I will just say this: there's a final scene, and the final scene goes to black, and I did not like the ending being left at the place where basically you say, "Oh, I guess that happened." And she even says it. She says, okay, I'm going to spoil a little bit. She says, I didn't go up to her. She sees her again, and she says, I did not go up to her. I did not talk to her. And I'm sitting there watching that going, why not? And if the movie had wanted to make a more sort of depressing statement, they could have had her see the other woman and then maybe even walk over there, and all of a sudden the husband comes and sits down. And that would just be this sort of, crushing letdown. But as it ended, I was just confused. I was like, well, why didn't you walk over there?
Okay, I'm going to be very, very quick about this. There are actually 3 endings. You missed all of them.
Ooh, okay, please educate me.
First ending was when she actually went to see the painting and saw the kid.
Yes.
Page 28.
That was great.
Second ending, rephrase that.
That would have been a great ending right there.
First ending was actually when she left the first time and shut that door. After she was leaving and saw her in the wedding dress.
Okay, all right.
That's first ending. Second ending is the painting on page 28.
Yes.
Third ending is the one at the opera.
Yes.
I can't decide whether I like the fact that they put all 3 endings in or whether I wanted just one of them. And I can't decide which one I want, but my brain says page 28.
I totally agree.
Would have been more than enough for me to go, okay, you've done it, movie. But the fact that you gave me 3, just said, okay, you're going to bring one out twice now.
Yeah.
Great.
But the last one just didn't make sense to me.
Oh, it makes sense if you think about how long she spent at that piano trying to play that piece and how she had never been to the opera. Like, knowing that the person you love finally went to the opera to hear the beauty that you'd always spoken about and be moved. And she wasn't there with her family. She chose to go by herself to have that experience and spend the entire, or most of the time, missing you is longingly romantic. But at no point throughout the film is it really indicated that the relationship meant that much other than the other 2 endings that were given.
Well, yeah, that's right. The other 2 endings. I mean, the page 28 ending, so it does say that.
So it's almost like we needed all 3 endings, but we kind of didn't. It's very confusing. What I'm trying to say to you all is if you want to see a stunning movie shot in 8K and you don't care about whether there's a love story in it or not, and you just want to go for the character dynamics and the interesting conversations that take place through looks, but also regular conversations, see this movie when it arrives sometime in 2020. If that's not your bag, boy, are you missing out on a great character study.
And if that's not your bag, check out Dolemite.
Exactly. So we will see you next time on Real Reviews, where we will probably be still not rewinding the clock, because there's so many Oscar movies that are out right now that we need to talk about, and this is just two of them. We'll see you next time at the movies. Bye, guys.